is we're going to summarize sort of what the project has been, where we've been, what the major ideas are. Now, for those of you that have been to some of these presentations, you know that we could talk for an hour about just our 5 dimensions of the waterfront, which is really our guiding ideas. And so I don't want to have that whole presentation. We want to move fairly quickly through all the components that we think will be embedded in the master plan. So if we do go quickly through something and we get to the end and you have a question and we want to go back, we'll do those at the end. So hopefully that we'll strike the right balance of having enough detail that those of you that are new will sort of understand the big ideas and how we got there. And then when we get into the drawings and some of the more specific imaginations of the waterfront in the future, everybody will be up to speed. We have had a process that has been going on for about 9 months or so. We started in September with some very, very intensive community dialogue on a lot of platforms. We had a major session in November to really reflect back to the community everything that we thought we had heard, and to put that into sort of a structure or a way of thinking about the waterfront that we call 5 dimensions of the waterfront. We had a major design exercise in January to start thinking about how to apply those philosophical ideas to different locations along the waterfront. And what we're doing now is we're trying to document all the work and put it into a format where it can be approved by council. We did get an endorsement today from our Downtown Waterfront Master Planning Task Force, which has been an advisory body to us as we've been going through the process. So we think we're getting close, but we're still refining. And if there's input tonight, we're happy to take those refinements and thoughts from you. One of our guiding ideas has been to really be faithful to the idea that we want to see your ideas reflected in the plan, and we want to make sure that you see your ideas reflected in the plan, as opposed to having the plan be something that really is just a set of external ideas that we have. This needs to be the community's plan, and we've been real committed to that. To help that happen, as I said, we spent a lot of time beginning in September, but really all the way through the process, meeting with all sorts of individual sort of stakeholder groups. These are a few of the groups that we met with. We've had a variety of different types of community input from the neighborhood level, walking audits. We did a special workshop with a particular youth group. We have had an online presence that thousands of people have been on, and we get on there and we monitor that and read the comments and so forth. And we've also done a tremendous amount of technical work, just looking at whether it's an engineering issue or a marine science issue or a boating issue or other metrics associated with how the parks and the land are working together to make your waterfront what it is. I mentioned that we've had some big events in November and January. These were intensive 4-day on-site design sessions where we came in, we gave an introductory presentation at the beginning of the week. We worked all week. We had open house things. We had hundreds of people participate. And at the end of the week, we would pin our work up and talk about it. So that's kind of been going through the process as well. So we've really worked to try to make this as interactive of a process as we can. And we're still working on that now. So we're going to be interested in what your comments are tonight. One of the framework ideas that I think has been important to the project, just to sort of think about it, is when you think about a geography that really goes from the coffee pot to Lansing Park and all the things in between, you can be talking about big ideas and little ideas sort of all at the same time. You may talk about something very dramatic in one location, say at the Deepwater Port, and in another location you just want to have a shade tree. And so the way that we have sort of put that into context is to say that as we develop the plan, we're going to have some things that are sort of baseline levels of comfort and levels of service that really ought to manifest themselves across the entire waterfront in terms of connectivity and shade and places to sit, places to get water, places to have different types of experiences. And from there are things that progressively become more and more targeted and even transformational at certain locations. But those will only happen in certain places. So as we've sort of thought about that, we've sort of said, okay, what are kind of the unifying ideas about the waterfront that can kind of philosophically kind of guide the way we think about this? So we started, one of the really good quotes that someone had for us early in the process was, was the notion that we are, the entire city, we're all connected by the water. Everyone can relate to the water in one way or another. And this project really needs to be a forward-thinking exercise for the next 20 years that really is a national model for how cities and water and environment relate to each other.
Excuse me, that picture is reversed.
Did it get reversed?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the Bill Gates probably did that for us without us knowing. We'll fix it. Thank you for that. We'll fix that. Another kind of guiding idea that has been important in the process is to recognize that there are all sorts of things on this waterfront that really interrelate to each other. So in other words, we do a lot of community planning where, particularly in an area as diverse as this, typically folks will be most passionate and most interested in the one particular niche that is most relevant to where they live, where they work, how they recreate, etc. And I think what we're trying to put on the table for the community is to maybe think about the waterfront, the water side, the natural environment, the seawall, the parks and open space, the buildings that are along the waterfront, and the neighborhoods that are behind all that. This is really one organism, and it's one composite of a community, and it's really not possible to think about a specific element not in context of the other pieces. And so we all need to probably broaden our minds a little bit about how we think about our neighbors, how we think about other systems that relate to the waterfront. This is a holistic composite. It's also a composite where we need to be thinking about a waterfront for everyone that is inclusive and usable. We've got a really diversifying population here in St. Pete in terms of age and different cultures, all different kinds of folks living in neighborhoods, coming into the city in new ways. Different parts of the city are growing in different ways. Folks have different needs. We want the Waterfront Master Plan to be something that inclusively provides recreational opportunities for everyone in the city. And we have to recognize that the environment that we're working in is dynamic. The wave action that's occurring, the use of the waterfront, the things that are going along in this area are happening all the time. So if we don't take charge of certain opportunities that we have, things will move on without us. And so it's important that we actually have sort of a proactive attitude towards our waterfront. Now, as we sort of worked at that sort of 20,000 foot level, we were getting an enormous amount of input from people about what was particularly important to them about the waterfront and how they sort of see the future of the city and the waterfront together. And all that input led us to 5 kind of broad buckets of topics that it seemed that virtually everything that people were telling us fit into one of these 5 major themes. And so these have become kind of guiding ideas for all the future planning. And I think going forward, as you make investments in your waterfront, these are the 5 big topical areas that you would come back to and say, are we following this philosophy as we're making this specific investment? So let me walk through these real quick. One has to do with just being great stewards of the waterfront environment. And it has a couple of aspects. One is the ecology of the city and the quality of the water that's going into the bay and the quality of the natural environment in the water. And the other has to do with resiliency and climate adaptation and dealing with wave energy and all of those sorts of things. So we know there's a component of the plan that needs to deal with environmental quality, and another that has to do with the fundamental physical relationship between the city and the bay. We know that it's really important that the Waterfront Master Plan deals with the use of the water. And that also has 2 components. It has to do with boating and the state of the marina assets that you have and how to diversify and look towards a successful future for the boating industry that you have. But also how to enhance and expand access to the water for people who don't own boats. So how can we get down and touch the water and have a more engaged relationship? So this means things, again, as sort of dramatic as thinking about the nature of the basins and how they're positioned within the regional market and really what St. Petersburg's address is within the Gulf of Mexico. If you think of people using boats to do tourism, when they come to St. Pete, what are the facilities? Can they park as a transient? What services can they get while they're here? Are there new boats? Are there new research vessels? All of those types of things that could be happening in the water. But also it gets down to, what are the locations where people can actually get down and access and touch the water and enjoy the fact that we all live in a waterfront city. In terms of the park system, we know that we want to have an active park system, but the challenge there is how active. And how do we balance a really long felt kind of cultural and spiritual sort of belief that what makes St. Petersburg wonderful is just the big open public green, that it's uncluttered visually, the views are beautiful. How to preserve that aesthetic is part of how St. Petersburg really defines itself. But then to link that to a recognition that there are all different kind of folks that live in the city, and the population is diversifying all the time, and there are folks that have different needs. So for instance, if you're pushing one of these strollers or you're riding that bicycle with the 12-inch wheels, you may have slightly different needs from a recreational point of view and from a service point of view than to just have all the big open lawn. So what we have is we have an emerging population of folks in the city going forward that really want to have a little bit more stuff to do when they get to the waterfront. They want to be able to get basic baseline things met, like access to a drinking fountain, access to shade, access to bike repair, access to incidental places to play. There's other people that actually want more activity in certain locations on the waterfront. Should we have a splash pad? Should we be able to buy an ice cream cone? Should you be able to have a different type of playground? Should you be able to discover art in creative, unique ways that maybe you didn't expect when you came from the waterfront? So we think that working on that juxtaposition has got to be an important part of the plan. Preserving the character of the waterfront, but also acknowledging and satisfying the needs of this emergent population. We also think that we need to have a waterfront that can continue to support large event gatherings. And obviously that's a really important part of the city going forward. And you have created a great event venue here, and we need to think about how to satisfy those needs. The fourth theme has to do with vibrant places along the water. It's interesting that there's only a couple of places on the whole waterfront to actually eat a fish sandwich. And when you extrapolate that a little bit and you say, well, how does the waterfront actually create economic value for the city? How do you drive value up into the neighborhoods so that if you're living inboard of the waterfront in the historic neighborhoods, you're actually driving quality of life and value on your street, even if you don't live on the water. So driving value into the neighborhoods, but also leveraging the potential of certain properties, particularly in the downtown area around what has been identified by ULI as the Innovation District. We think that this economic opportunity here for the city is really a core strategic underpinning for the future of the city. The fact that you have a university, you have research institutions, you have an active and functioning airport, you have a deep water port, you have all sorts of other marine-based things going on, you have the hospitals, and they're all there right next to each other. And if you think about the spectrum of jobs, from high-wage, high-skilled jobs down to all the technical and support people that can support those entities, and what they can mean to the future of your city, it's really profound. And so there's this fine-grained relationship of the waterfront to, does it help the value of my home? Can I get the fish sandwich at a really fine-grained level? To how does the waterfront really enhance the value of these really significant properties that other cities would really envy to have? And then finally, it's important to think about how we move around on the waterfront. So this framework or dimension of the waterfront has to do with getting a more fully connected system. There's too many locations on the waterfront where the walking or bicycling opportunity breaks down. You can't get from north to south very easily. And there's places where just understanding where to go, how to use the trolley system, how to get to the parking systems that you have is not fully interconnected. So we want to work on moving people around on heels and on wheels, and we want a better connected multimodal system for moving people we think the city, this is certainly has historically been a car city the last 30 years or so, but the city is moving very strongly towards being a walking city, a biking city, a trolley city. So we want to have a really multimodal system for how we move people around and how we connect our community. You can see the evidence of the car culture when you look at locations on the uplands that are covered in parking lots. And we go on our walking audits with folks, and virtually everyone on the walk is saying, I wish we didn't have cars parked on the bulkhead. I would like to be on the bulkhead with my dog or on my bike. And so it's purely just an evolution from a place that really is a car-dominated area to something that's more balanced with other modes of transportation. So the challenge that we then had as a design team was how do you take those dimensions and start to push them across a very diverse geography here in downtown St. Petersburg. You see the coffee pot up here, this is north, Lansing Park down here to the south, and all the things happening in between. So to do that, we have started to construct a plan that's organized around some things that are really area-wide, and then some things that are sort of district-based. And to touch on a few of the area-wide things, we've gotten very, very clear direction about things like signage and wayfinding, having a clear idea about water quality and storm resiliency, dealing with circulation, having preserving key views and vistas in the city, having the arts and cultural community that you have here really read through your parks. You know that the park system is really a reflection of the kind of really interesting cultural community that you have here, and so forth and so on. So in that way, when you get into the draft plan, what you'll see is there's a series of pages that provide thoughts on some of these overall area-wide systems. So we think, for instance, developing a clear set of thoughts about the waterways and the basins and acting on it is a really, really important thing for the city going forward. We've got basins that are not being optimized. There's too much wave action. We've got poor water quality in certain locations. The ability to navigate from one basin to another if you're in a small craft is difficult. And ultimately, the ability in the long term, of protecting the city from wave action during big storms is probably not where we think it should be. And so I think developing a comprehensive program for the waterside wave protection and boat facilities for the city is really important. We have ideas about the complete north-south connectivity program. And we'll show this in some of our sketches coming up. But having a continuous north-south trail, connecting that to a growing downtown transit system, improving your trolley service, linking to maybe regional ferry and water taxi types of ideas, and really evolving to a pedestrian-first type of city, which if you go back more than 30 years, if you go back 50, 60, 70 years, this is a pedestrian-oriented city. This is a traditional city. You have great bones in the city. It's just that we made a series of decisions for a few decades that really were very auto-centric. And I think we're rebalancing now. In conjunction with that idea of rebalancing, and I mentioned parking earlier, is really starting to think about a people-first plan for what's happening at Water's Edge. And that means that we need to think a little more comprehensively about downtown parking. That means having enough parking assets in the right locations in town that are well-signed, easy to use, which I would say right now we're not well-signed and we're not particularly easy to use. But having those assets in the right locations, and then what comes with that is an expectation and an understanding that you may walk a couple of blocks to get to your destination. You may not park exactly in front of the thing that you want to be at, but you're going to be in a wonderful city, and you're going to get rewarded through great urban design to take that couple of block walk. We also think that from an activity point of view, looking at it comprehensively, we think that we can diversify where the activity nodes are and what their roles are. We think there are small locations for very light touch, kind of neighborhood-based levels of service that can be improved. And then we think in the downtown, we think that we can decant some of the really heavy event burden that Vinoy Park is carrying almost single-handedly now. We think we can decant some of that to a couple of other locations within the general downtown and relieve some of the pressure from that one particular location. And then finally, in terms of implementation, You know, I introduced this sort of triangle of baseline, targeted, and transformational earlier. We think we can look at the waterfront and say, you know, where are the levels of intervention that really are going to be sort of light touch? You know, don't break it. It's not really broke. Let's just polish it a little bit. You know, we think that those areas are really in the Coffee Pot in Lansing Park. And as you get into the downtown, you get things where there are more opportunities for targeted enhancements and even transformational change that can really recharacterize the city's relationship to its waterfront. So that's where you see the green, the blue, and the purple. And that's also discussed in the plan. So let me go through these districts kind of one by one, and I'll hit some of the high points. What we did is we said, okay, we've got a very large area, but it's really made up of a bunch of individual sort of unique sub-districts that are really different from each other. And we need to be very context sensitive in our recommendations. You wouldn't do the same thing in the Coffee Pot as you would do in the South Basin, for instance. And we need to have a plan that although there are some overriding ideas, the plan also needs to be dialed to what all those different place types are really all about. So let me walk through these. The Coffee Pot, we think that in general this is definitely a light touch, polish the gem type of area. We think that this is about minor improvements to the park at the north end, really is sort of the gateway to the regional trail system. People walk from the Coffee Pot all the way down to downtown and beyond, as you know. They can't very well go south of there, and we'll get to that in a minute. We think we can do a better job of accommodating pedestrians, and we think there are some locations where we can strengthen neighborhood relationships in terms of just urban form and crosswalks and ADA access and those types of things. So we think this is about small improvements over time to your ability to put a kayak in, do non-motorized boating access. There are some garden architecture opportunities. There are some stormwater retrofit types of things where we can clean the water a little better before it goes, before it outfalls. And then there are some locations where we can do some targeted kind of restroom. Maybe if you get into a bike share program in St. Petersburg, that might be the northernmost point where you might have a bike share station. And then we actually think from a transformational point of view, sooner or later that street is going to have to be reconstructed, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So we have a great venue. Obviously, this is as good as it gets, right? We don't want to fundamentally change this in any way. But we also think there's some great things that are occurring here that maybe could be replicated in other locations. So when we talk about sort of garden architecture and the ability to maybe look at a setting like this, you know, sort of with the lonely bench, you know, and we've got the stormwater pond here that's really just a swale in the St. Augustine. We say, well, you know, maybe what if there was a little garden type of architecture thing here, and that bench could actually become a swing, and it could have shade, and we could take a look at what the boat facilities are to put in a kayak or put in a john boat. If we could just make minor enhancements to this area, we can make it an even better neighborhood park without really changing its characteristics. Looking at the street, I think this is where we talk about something maybe transformational. As we look at the sidewalk here, this is very narrow, as you know. And people are walking through the gravel where the trees are, and we've got direct outfall going into the bayou. And you can see, looking at the bricks, how things are sort of warping and modeling and stuff. So sooner or later, this road is going to have to be repaired. And when that happens, you may consider, as a transformational idea, doesn't mean you have to, but you may consider, as an idea, the notion that the road, which in places is 24, 27 feet wide, it could actually get a little bit narrower, get down to about 20 or 22 feet. And that will buy you space to have a more clear, wide sidewalk with a rain garden and different type of stormwater solution to clean the water before it goes into the bayou. And we actually think we can make this amazing promenade that you already have into an even better kind of environment. You wouldn't think about that until it was really time that the roadbed was really failing, but I think the punchline here is there are locations on that road where it is starting to fail. And we think at some point in the next 10 or 12 years, you probably will have to look at doing something with that street. The next district is the North Shore Parks, sort of collection of parks north of Vinoy. And we think that the opportunities here really have to do with organizing the park, and rather than thinking of it as sort of all one kind of uniform venue is to recognize the fact that there are some very distinct sub-districts to this incredibly large park. There is clearly an open green space, sort of relaxed, fly a kite, pick up frisbee, sit on a bench, kind of area to the north. There is a little sort of neighborhood play area here that's starting to develop, where you have beach access, you have restrooms, there's a group that does Tai Chi, there's a group that occasionally tries to do some bocce, and then you have a sort of a competitive area here where you have the Kids and Cubs Field, you've got the aquatic center, and then of course you have the area where you do all the big staging for a lot of your big events over by the Vinoy, right? So our thought is that we could actually make this park a more interesting setting and actually satisfy a broader set of community needs if we would actually sort of accentuate and celebrate each of those four functions a little bit. So as an example, we think that, for instance, I'm going to actually jump ahead a couple of slides here. Let's look at sort of this north area. We think that this north lawn should really stay very much the way it is, but we also can actually make it even more calm by possibly introducing at some key locations where we know speeding occurs, a little bit of kind of ceremonial traffic calming, and we can build into that different pedestrian facilities, different bicycle facilities, and make this an even quieter section of the north end of the park. We think that there are areas as you move towards the restroom building where we have parking lots that are really becoming sort of aged, and they really represent sort of an out-of-date sort of idea about how to park people, how to deal with stormwater runoff from parking lots before it goes into the bay. We actually think that we could accentuate what's going on here and really sort of celebrate the natural Florida environment by treating the stormwater runoff from the parking lots differently, and ultimately have a park entrance to sort of a more active kind of community area in this sort of a way, so that rather than walking, sort of through, sort of a semi-mushy sort of swale area that really is St. Augustine sod and whatever fertilizers come with that, and that's sort of going right into the bay, it could actually be in a different type of experience, and we can have some of those same kind of comfort things like a shade structure. We can have little discovery areas to play. There can be some environmental education about what this little area is really about, and we can actually recover more usable green space because we would better consolidate the stormwater runoff into this kind of biotreatment rain garden area. And then that would sort of set us up for the area where we have the restroom building and the beach access to actually create something here that can be a little bit more of a full-service community park for the locals. Something where, if you want to rent a kayak, maybe a little nicer restroom, something where you can get an ice cream cone, something where the experience of walking down to the beach is a little more celebrated. Maybe there's some kind of wind art or some other thing that sort of celebrates what's happening at that location. So this can be a little node of activity where some of those more sort of diversified recreational things that we heard that people were hungry for, this would be a natural place to put it. Primarily because this is where the beach access is and where the restroom is. We can build around that and then let the other areas stay green. Let me move into sort of the downtown area here. We have an area, really, if you think of the North Basin, otherwise known as the Vinoy Basin, the Pier uplands, Bayshore, this is the Art Museum, South Straub, and then this is the Central Basin. We think here we're starting to move out of this sort of light touch with a few targeted opportunities. We're now starting to move into something that feels more significant target opportunities and even some transformational opportunities. So we're kind of changing gears into a level of intervention that could be more dramatic. So let me talk to you about what that is. We think that we can fundamentally recharacterize Bayshore Drive and the Pier uplands as a really active, vibrant community public space. Still accommodates cars, still has some parking, maybe not quite as much, but maybe 20 or 30% less parking. puts people at water's edge and gives people more things to do on regular days, and also provides new flexibilities for you to accommodate all different types of events. So let me walk through what I think that looks like. Starting sort of up at Beach Drive, we envision really bringing the pier address all the way up to Beach Drive, so that when you're up here at the restaurants, there's a major announcement right at that location that you are now really in the pier geography, and it's all one space. It's not a series of sort of disconnected urban events. We think that should the art museum ever expand to the south, and we think there's a possibility that they will want to do that at some point, they should come to the south and join with the street so that we really have a traditional urban edge with active ground floor uses. That's really where you're really putting the art museum on a really dramatic civic space. And then we can then relate that to a redesigned South Straub Park that has more clear open space with shade around the edges and seating and so forth.
Just so you know, you're not pointing at anything, it's not showing up.
Oh, it's not showing up. Oh,
I'm
great.
going to use the laser.
I'll use the laser. You're not seeing the mouse on there?
No. I know they are.
There it is. Okay, I'll go a little slower with that. So this is Vaughn's drawing, and I want to, Vaughn, if you have anything that you want to add to this, but
that's existing.
Here's where we are. This is a hypothetical area of expansion for the art museum. And anything that happens in there will have to work around those existing trees. We recognize that. It's a volumetric area. Should anything happen on the south side, we're just dealing with the volume, right?
You start going, here it goes.
Right? So the idea is that there's a completely different address as you go from beach and proceed out towards the water. And there's a whole series of things happening here. You see sort of the iconographic fountain or art opportunity here. The whole space is really one large shared space that happens to accommodate cars, but it's really a shared civic space, like a European piazza kind of experience. We think we can do a similar treatment with Bayshore, and I'll show that in a minute. And then the whole procession of being able to reclaim the edge and have a great walking experience along the edge, because we've reconfigured the slips, and have a central kind of art walk right through the middle of this out to a major community park idea here at Spa Beach, and then have that lead you to whatever the pier becomes, is really the idea. And Vaughn, you want to take a minute? Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that captures it.
Okay. And then Bayshore, we've talked, and ULI spoke about this, but they didn't do any detailed drawings, but I think most folks that we have interacted with on this project, including on our walking audit, I think really expressed a desire of somehow bringing Straub Park all the way to water's edge. And again, creating sort of a shared space environment that on regular, Monday to Friday kind of thing could accommodate cars, but was really a fundamentally different type of setting when you want to have events or you want to do special things. And so we see this as a shared use street that accommodates bicycles, festivals, overlooks, new sort of sitting experiences, new ways to get close to the water, new ways to celebrate, and really reclaiming this whole thing as really an extension of Straub Park all the way to the water. Can still accommodate cars when you need to, but that's not the role of having some traffic Monday through Friday is not defining what the space is. It's completely repackaged as a park that goes all the way to water's edge. Here's another view when we were doing some early sketches. And so the idea that this becomes a place with overlooks and great views and places to sit, places to ride a bike, and the green is extending as much as possible to water's edge. Seems like an important idea. Now, another thing that we looked at, and again, this goes back, this is why I really wanted to back up and go through the dimensions. We talked about, places that are providing a complete park experience and the ability to have basic services and have economic opportunities along the waterfront. When we look at a location like this and we see the museum backing up to the water with the sort of the big blank wall, we look at it and we say, gosh, that would be such a great place to be. And You can be walking around the edge, you can be, you know, having a sandwich, you can be on a kayak because we're going to protect the basin. There could be interesting ways to cross the canal. There's so many things that can be done with that, and it seems like in this location, this is the kind of thing where we should think big. So speaking of thinking big, as we sort of move into the upland area, we have a whole set of ideas about really the upland to the pier as the introduction of a major community activity space. This starts by recharacterizing the edges, as I spoke about. So being able to walk all the way along the edge and be right on the bulkhead instead of being sort of pinned between all the parked cars and the fencing. Celebrating through the middle with this art walk, and then creating a location here that can be a major sort of port of call for people that are coming to the city through transient dockage, another place to eat that can sort of leverage with frescoes, so this becomes a little more active area, a place to maybe rethink the parking lot as something that again can be a shared space where you could set up, this could be a candidate location for the Saturday morning market. You can have a large sort of open air pavilion structure here with restrooms. The trolley could come up here and turn around, drop people off. There's a whole set of exchanges that could be happening at this location. And in conjunction with that, let me show you this image here. This is the art walk idea. So you see sort of, you know, integrated art in the seating. You can imagine all the kinds of festivals you could hold here. But there's also the ability to bike and walk along the edge of the bulkhead and get to the water's edge. When you get up to the location where this idea meets the pier, we really envision Spa Beach as something that truly could be a community park that's highly active, that is a hinge point between whatever the pier solution is and the rest of the upland. So we think about bringing in trolley service, maybe having a small restaurant opportunity here near the water, using the grade change between the upland and the pier elevation to create maybe a small amphitheater effect where events could occur, having a little sundries area here that could spill down into the beach, to be able to rent a kayak or get an ice cream cone or do a cookout, camp out in terms of picnicking underneath the trees, maybe rethinking sort of an environmental experience here on the back side that can absorb a lot of the wave reflection that's happening in the Vinoy Basin. So this is a drawing of what you might do with that area. And I know that, you know, there's a lot of discussion in the community right now about how to think about the pier uplands, how to think about the redevelopment of the pier itself. I think what this program or what this plan is putting on the table is the idea that, first of all, getting out to the pier should be a series of small events that are dynamic and interesting. It's not just one long, you know, mile-and-a-half walk. It's a series of small walks with all sorts of points of interest and discovery and things to do, first of all. We also think that pedestrians should be prioritized along the water's edge, and that's very important, and that's not happening now. We think trolley should be able to come up here and drop people off. This should be a significant kind of port of call, and that we should have a fundamentally park environment out here where you really can come out here and recreate and have a day at the beach and all the things that you might do over a 4 or 6 hour period of time. Those things should be served out here so that this becomes an active, desirable place for people to hang out. And then the next move is to get out on the pier and enjoy whatever the solutions are out on the pier.
Excuse me a second.
Yes, sir.
Are you taking into consideration the fact that people live on those boats, or at least some do?
Yes, we know there's liverboards out there.
You were mentioning about getting to the water's edge.
Yes.
Squeezing people against fences.
Yeah. So the way that works, and this is it's a good question though. How do we get people to water's edge? Right now, everything along the water, you can't get down to the boat because the boats are right there on the bulkhead, right? So we have to have a fence, and we have to separate people so they don't jump on the boats. And that's easily addressed if we create some distance between where you walk and where you actually access the slips. So I can find a better image of it here in the plan. Here you go. Okay, this is good. So if the slips are working like this, and this is the point of entry, and the boats are not all lined up along the bulkhead, then this can become public, and this becomes a controlled gate, and I can't jump from over here. So what it really is about is it's about a reconfiguration of how the slips work in the marina, which we are quite certain needs to happen regardless, because we have so many other issues in the marinas in terms of antiquated dockage, not having enough dockage, not having enough transient dockage, having unprotected areas that are getting too much wave action, and that needs to get dealt with. So I go back to sort of the top of the discussion where I said one of the most important things that we do early in the execution of any master plan is start to work on fundamentally reconfiguring these basins, because many of them are out of date, inefficient, and they don't offer good wave protection for the long term of these boats. So we think when that happens, when you're ready to make that investment, you should configure the slips in a way that allows pedestrians to actually get to water's edge. And right now they can't, and it's purely a function of how the boats are lined up on the bulkhead. Make sense? Yes. Sort of? Let me keep going. Let me move to, here's Spa Beach. It's a very active location. Thinking about how people can use the water. Maybe have places where there's sort of inboard protected boating areas. Now let me get to the South Basin. I think that this is a little different from, we were just up here. This is the Central Basin. South Straub Park is right here. The Pier upland is right here. This area, this is where the Saturday morning market occurs, and this is Demon's Landing. This is the area where the Allenine Field is. This is the Mahaffey. This is the Dally. This is the parking garage. Here we see sort of what we think are sort of a different set of opportunities are kind of offered to the city. What you have here, and I think you all have probably experienced that the walkability and the connectivity sort of breaks down when you get to this area. The buildings start to get bigger, the facades aren't very good, the blocks are really big, the roads get bigger. It's just hard to navigate the whole area. What we see is an opportunity to complete a composition of entertainment and cultural venues that are sort of occurring down here. And as those things maybe infill, you can get to an outcome where you actually have a really vibrant cultural district down here that could include renovations to the Allenine Stadium as that experiment continues to evolve with the current operator. There could be new development pads for, say, hotel or conference facilities that could provide an important community function that could position you or diversify you in terms of tourism and people coming to St. Pete to do things. If we can get conferencing back in the city in a bigger way. There could be new museum pads that could occur here if there's new museum opportunities for the city, and we believe there are going forward. So we really look at this area as a place where this area can develop and we can actually build some new connectivity into the urban pattern and start to create more of an urban edge and an active edge where this starts to feel more like the city and not sort of like the back 40 to the downtown in terms of the large surface parking lots and so forth. We also think this can be a destination for a regional ferry to the extent that people that maybe from across the bay may be coming to the Mahaffey or the Dally or the Allenine or one of these other facilities. So we really see this as an area that can really be celebrated from an entertainment point of view. We think Demon's Landing, kind of similar to the discussion on the Pier uplands, we just see a lot of parking sort of throughout the park. And there's not really a thought at Demon's Landing about let's let parking be parking and let park be park. So what we've tried to do here is really organize the experience of coming over the canal, maybe with a little bit more activity at the edge, maybe places to tie boats up at the edge, near the current Saturday morning market site, a sort of a ceremonial entry. Let's consolidate the parking and deal with it efficiently, so that it can access the facilities that it needs to get to. And then let's decant all the parking and roadways out of the actual park and develop a wonderful venue out here on the water that overlooks the bay and people can really gather and enjoy the water here. And have really a different relationship all the way along the edge for pedestrians, which again, right now, so many areas of this are really defined by the automobile. drilling down and kind of zooming into this area, what you see is this opportunity for new types of facilities to come into this area and really complete the composition of a place with a more urban sort of situation for whatever this sports venue becomes, maybe retail on the ground floor, maybe hotel or conference center or museum pads that could occur in here. This can actually become a wonderful little entertainment district. And it happens to be near some other hotel assets that you have, so it seems like that's the natural place for that to occur. So it can start to feel like this, where you're having festivals, you have art, it's more of a people space, it's a plaza that can accommodate cars from time to time, but when you want to hold it for events like this and have a celebration or have a festival, it's really better set up for that than it is today. And as we think about the infrastructure here, which is really just a series of driveways in between a series of sort of suburban buildings that are really pulled away from the road, we can start to create more of an environment like this that really goes ahead and celebrates what those uses are and creates a really exciting dynamic district on the south side of your downtown. And it happens to occur in a place where, you know, it's close to the airport, it's close to some hotels, you know, it's in an area that's kind of better positioned to support these kinds of uses and the things that come with it than, say, trying to do something like this up towards the Vinoy, where you've got, you know, neighborhoods coming right almost to water's edge and everything is much more fine-grained. You wouldn't want that up there, but it actually works very well right here. Here's a view of the water taxi and a repositioned edge. And then that kind of spills down into the Salt Creek area, which is the other part of this economic development opportunity that I noted at the beginning when I was doing the dimensions. We think that the fact that you have the airport, the Coast Guard, the deep water port, research, USF, hospitals, all of the industries in here that can do the kind of repair and service to a really deep marine industry here in St. Petersburg. This is really important stuff to the future of the city. Because again, this is about jobs and this is about supporting the businesses that can make the economy go. What we see is an opportunity to better leverage some of those things. We think over time we can start to take better advantage of the deep water port, maybe build some piers that would support large research vessels, mega yachts, other types of boats that right now are strained to be supported here. We think that over time there's going to be an opportunity to consolidate the Coast Guard operations on one side of the bay. They would like to be consolidated. It's not easy for them to be in two different locations. If we do that, we can really create an experience here along the Salt Creek and Bayboro area that could start to feel very, very different and much more dynamic with a number of type of business opportunities, experience opportunities, to come down here and experience the working waterfront as part of being on the water in St. Petersburg. This is, again, a whole other type of ingredient that you have the ability to deliver as a city. It's very different from what you might do at North Shore. This area lends itself to an opportunity of these industrial uses supporting a completely refreshed and new and really forward-moving economy for the future of your city. And again, this comes with jobs at all different pay grades. And we think this is a really important deal for the future of the waterfront. Yes, Jack?
What'd you do with my terminal tour?
Where did it go?
Yeah.
The terminal building needs to go in the drawing.
It's an older photo.
That's the road. Okay, all right. Good catch. We're not getting rid of the terminal building. And that's why we're doing this. This is a draft. So that's a no, we're not testing you. It's April Fool's, yeah. No, honestly though, that's one reason why we're doing this, is if there's things that we spot, because we're not ready to go to council yet. So yeah, we need to get that building in there. The sewage treatment plant is off the page, but we think that the sewage treatment plant that property needs to get put to good use. And we think it's important that the Coast Guard, the airport, the deep water port, that all of those entities are working together to make the best possible use of the land that they can towards everybody's mutual success. So coming down and accessing the water, coming down sort of a new gateway plaza, being able to get to the Bayboro, thinking about the future of Pointer Park, thinking about sort of, do we need to be parking all these cars on the water's edge? Why isn't this an economic development opportunity in the water and an experiential opportunity on the land? And this goes back to a lot of comparables that Vaughn showed early in the process, looking at other cities, what they've done with their industrial waterfronts to both grow the industry as well as grow the experience. And even bringing in tall ships and creating opportunities to really experience and sort of enjoy this kind of creek works thing, that the different businesses that are back there serving boat repair types of industries. And then ultimately, again, you look at something like this and you say, okay, well, we've got, we have an environmental issue here. We've got sort of minimal infrastructure. This is the mouth of Salt Creek. The boat repair places are right back here. We have an underutilized piece of property here. I mean, over time, this could be completely recharacterized. And it could be an economic driver and also an experience driver.
How are you going to get sailboats up the creek?
We envision this as a swinging bridge, and we can talk about that more in the Q&A. And then finally down to Lansing Park. Now we're sort of back to that sort of light touch kind of vernacular that we were in when we started in the coffee pot. So we think this is about very limited park enhancements, but there are a few things that are fairly important that we do deal with here. First of all, we need to connect Lansing Park to the rest of the city, and I'm going to show that in a minute. We also think if this Salt Creek area here really occurs, we think sort of connecting around the Army Reserve site and getting to this can be an important idea. As we walk Lansing Park with the neighborhood, and this is one of our walking audits, we did about 5 of these, there's a couple of things that you see, and this is where sort of the light touch kind of stuff comes into play. One is, you see that you cross the street, there's no crosswalk, you can't get to the bench. So in terms of just basic accessibility for people, who may have a walking disability or just meeting the basics of the American Disabilities Act, we're not doing that here, and we don't really have just sort of a basic level of service along the edge for the park. And as you get out to water's edge, what you notice is there's these large structures that smell bad, and they're out in the middle of the sand. And how did they get there? And the way that they got there is that the sand is pulled back, or the park is actually pulled back. We have an erosion issue here. So I think from a light touch point of view, we're into some environmental things that we need to do to deal with these stormwater outfalls, some of the exposed pipes that are popping out here in the grass, and the way that the beach is being eroded has got to be dealt with in some way that is environmentally responsible, but also preserves the neighborhood's general desired aesthetic of just a big front yard green space that's not cluttered. And we certainly understand that we don't want to clutter this up with a lot of park stuff. But we do think that treating around the edges and treating the water's edge is beneficial both to the future of the park as well as new ways to serve the neighborhoods and the neighborhoods beyond. And then I mentioned connecting back to the city, and there was a lot of discussion about just how difficult it is to get from Old Southeast back up into the downtown. And we certainly think, I started at the beginning at Coffee Pot talking about a continuous network of trails and bikeways. We think there's a great opportunity to do a really, really well-branded, really highly legible, beautiful, very safe trail system that goes completely from the north all the way to the south and even beyond the Lansing Park geography. And you know that when you're on this is sort of the yellow brick road. Once you're on this, even if you're going through an area that is maybe a little bit industrial or maybe a little bit transitional, you know you're on the trail that's going to take you somewhere. There's going to be places to sit and get some respite. There's going to be water. There's going to be just basic services along that trail. Very important idea, we think, coming out of that walk in Old Southeast. So let me move forward just a little bit and wrap up and talk about sort of our initial ideas about implementation. We need to develop ways of thinking about implementation that include multiple sort of characteristics. One is that we talked earlier about sort of baseline needs, targeted enhancements, transformational change. That's code for not very expensive, expensive, and really expensive, right? So we need to think about different tracks to deal with different levels of investment over a period of time. So that means we need to think about priorities, and we need to think about different funding mechanisms to do different things. Now, as we looked at sort of our baseline things, and this is sidewalks and trees and benches and swings and all those types of things. If you go from north to south for 7 miles, we estimate this could be $30 or $40 million over a 20-year period of time. That's a lot of money. The targeted types of things, so when we talked about the little neighborhood community park north of the Vinoy, you know, some of the other kind of street modifications and so forth, that could be $60 or $70 million. And the really transformative things where you're completely remaking, you know, a significant chunk of the waterfront, like the creek works, for instance. This, you know, these things could be 120 to 150, 140 million dollars to do some of these things. And then there's a whole set of other opportunities out there that could be anywhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 600 million dollars or more, where there's a partnership opportunity. So, for instance, if we think about that southern area near the Mahaffey, if a hotel were to go in there, that could represent $100 million worth of development. And the city may have a partnership role in that that could be very small or it could be significant. On the other hand, there could be a need, there could be no need at all to participate in a hotel conference center, but there could be a need to participate in a parking structure that you might do in collaboration with USF and maybe other entities. And so what we see is a development value of quite a bit of money in certain of these areas, but these are different types of projects, and the city, how the city would participate is to be determined based on how the opportunities evolve. Does that make sense? So there's a little bit sort of an apples and oranges thing here, where these things are clear capital investments, and these are sites that could have significant development value, and the manner in which the city might participate is undetermined because there are so many opportunities. If somebody wants to come in with a $30 million museum, they may just need the land. And that may be the city's participation is to help them with the land. Does that make sense? Okay. Then let me plunge forward a little bit. How did we get to these numbers? We have been working through all the different projects that we see in this. And this would go all the way to the floor and stretch out to where the chairs are if I was to print the whole thing. What we're doing here is we're looking at things that are sort of waterfront wide, like having a wayfinding master plan for the entire waterfront, or investing in a better trolley service for the waterfront. And we also have things that are district-based. When we go to the coffee pot, we say, all right, what are the 4 or 5 projects that we're really talking about in that area? So we've worked through the waterfront wide, and we're working through each of the districts, and we're trying to code what are the projects out of our 5 dimensions. What do those projects sort of engage? So this is environment, water, parks, economic development, and transportation. You know, so where can we do things that are actually affecting those dimensions of the waterfront? And then what do we think that means in terms of numbers? And you see that I cleverly have cut the numbers off because we're still working on it. And it's not about microanalyzing that at this stage of the game. But this is the way we're constructing, the way we're thinking about it financially. And then that helps inform how we think about what the possible funding mechanisms might be. Some things will cost more than others. Some things you'll do over a long period of time, very incrementally, like a street tree program, for instance. Other things are sort of a really significant one-shot investment that you need a sizable amount of money to take on. For instance, like the Pier project that you're looking at doing. So we think of public agencies and sort of locally based sort of pay-as-you-go out of your capital improvement program, maybe some CRA redevelopment areas that you have. You have the ability to bond, you have the ability to go after grants, you have the ability to work with Pinellas County, the state of Florida, and even the federal government on some of these types of projects. So there's a whole spectrum of public agencies and public tools that are out there. Similarly with the private sector, you know, you can be doing philanthropy and foundations and affinity organizations to do some fine-grained things, and then there may be significant opportunities for partner development on a couple of these sites where you work together and there's significant dollars being put in from multiple parties. And really a very similar type of thing with institutions. If you can identify some things, say with somebody like a USF, where you have some shared missions and some outcomes that you're trying to get to together, then you look for those partnering opportunities. Another way of thinking about this is that there's projects that are small, projects that are medium, projects that are large. So we think that there's small things, that sort of those baseline things, that really can be sort of a pay-as-you-go, local philanthropy, maybe some targeted partners, maybe some penny for Pinellas money that you try to go after. And then there's medium sort of scale things where you really are going to have to look at using your TIF money from your CRAs downtown, getting into maybe the bond finance market to get enough money together to build the thing, getting into some P3 types of things. And then ultimately there's large projects that really are going to require some heavy lifting from other agencies to get you where you need to go. So we're trying to kind of matrix all of those things so that we can put the kinds of projects that we have on that very large spreadsheet into the context of, sort of pay as you go, get some financing, have big partners. If that's a spectrum of how you pay for things. What are the things that are sort of the baseline things that are, we can maybe more deal with over on this side of the spectrum? Where are those targeted kind of streetscape and park things that maybe are more sort of the middle part of the spectrum? And then where are the really significant things like comprehensively dealing with all of your navigable basins, where you really need to have some really substantial partners and ways of getting to the right amount of money. So that's kind of how we're approaching defining how you take down a project like this over 10 or 20 years. And speaking of that, I think that another important notion is that when you think of these baseline types of things, these are a whole series of small investments, and you do them over a long period of time to effectuate change. The targeted things are going to happen a little more episodically, and there might be more time between one project and another. And then this transformational thing, these are significant blocks of investment that take significant years to build, and you may not do another one for several years. So you're moving from fine grain all the time to things that progressively get bigger and are more episodic in terms of getting the strategy together, getting the funding together, who the partners are, and how you're going to execute it. Is that a helpful way to sort of think about it? We can get way into the weeds, but I thought this was a good way to sort of frame the way we think about the problem. So, going forward, we're going to do another one of these presentations tonight. We'll have some conversation tonight. We're continuing to refine the plan. We know there's at least one building that needs to go on here. There's actually a couple of other issues with this drawing that we know that we need to correct as well. We're going to continue to work on implementation, and the plan is to begin the formal public review process towards the end of April, beginning of May. So we're on a path to get to that, and we're working real hard. But it's important that you see things in sort of draft form. For those of you that haven't been along for this 9-month ride, we wanted to give you enough of the backup that you know how we got to where we are, and you can reconstruct it in your mind. We invite you to go to the website. You can link to it on the city's website. You'll see the link to the Waterfront Master Plan.